Hey, what is good? We're on episode 2. The sound might show up a little bit differently just because we're having all sorts of technical difficulties. When I started up this enterprise, I thought it was gonna be chill, it was gonna be lax, it was gonna be fine. And publishing the podcast has had issues, and the equipment I bought recently tried to test it out, and my voice sounded a lot more faded. So hopefully this suffices for people. I know people can get very particular. It's if you have nothing to offer in terms of a podcast, you might as well have a good sound quality, and that's all I can hope to offer to you people. Um, but we're still working on it. So these next episodes, these next two or three might sound a little janky, a little off. But we're gonna and bearing it. If you don't like it, I guess you just won't listen. And hey, no big loss there. I'm lucky for the audience that I have. So I wanted to talk on a subject that kind of was sort of the impetus for me even wanting to have a platform like this that I gave to myself, which was Charles Kirk, the young little LA fast food icon that made a wish to become a real boy. That's had the attention of the country for the past 2 or so weeks, although that's starting to wane, I guess, a little bit. Now that he's, I guess, in the ground. I'm not really confident. I don't remember what Christians do exactly. I'm sure that's something I could have researched, I guess, before I stuck my dumbass face into a microphone like this. But yeah, um, it's gotten people all types of acting up. It's twisted this world, and I don't know about you. I live in a very liberal city. I know what my politics are. I'm very confident in that. But my world that I lived in while Charlie Kirk was alive, it's not a whole lot different from the one that he's now dead in. I don't know. Did anyone else have that experience? They say, oh, you remember where you were when JFK was shot and 9/11 happened? And I was taking a shit when this all went down. I'm not even being facetious there. I like the crap. Um, and initially you just think, well, he'll get through it. It's one gunshot. That's America. Everyone gets shot eventually if they don't get a heart attack. And you just figure he'll be fine. He'll get through. Like you don't realize that he's gotten hit in the neck. You just kind of think, oh, he got hit in the leg or the arm or something like that. And he got shot. He got hit in front of all these college students. And people had said the video was gory. You don't want to watch this. Turn you off your tea if you're British. Um, and I don't mean to invalidate anyone's feelings of trauma if they felt sad or in any way angry looking at that. That's great. Voice that. For me, and I've been a man who's been on the internet for a good 2 3 decades now. I've seen our Bud Dwyer. I've seen Goatsy, which kind of turned out to be an old man showing his anus to people. Um, what I watched of Charlie Kirk didn't really trouble me that much in comparison. You see, uh, I guess you see a fair amount of blood pour out, and then he just kind of like topples over to the side, and this is kind of like, oh, that didn't look too pleasant. That didn't look like too pleasant an experience. Sorry for that. Sorry that it got caught up in that. I still to this day I can't even Google Chris Farley. without looking away and just thinking, oh, I don't want to see that picture they posted of him while he was dead. And of all celebrities to have a death picture of him, I'm glad that we got Chris Farley. I can just imagine saying, so, no, I think he's still alive. Yeah, well, look at this shit. I figure if we're gonna have photos of any celebrity, maybe Jeffrey Epstein, maybe confirm that he's gone, that he's dead. So overall, Charlie Kirk, um, I felt moved by it in some circumstances, but I was questioning um, the decisions people were making to reflect on his murder. I'm spitting a lot here. I still currently have braces because I'm in suspended adolescence. Um, yeah, yeah, no, just the whole the jump to say that it was political violence before we even knew who did it, what his bent was, if he even knew Charlie, who Charlie was at all, honestly, because that happens in America. Strangers shooting strangers, they don't really give a fuck. Just that jump to say it was political violence when in essence he was a guy on YouTube, as I understand it, as I've through all the media that I've had to consume of him over the past 2.5 weeks as a result of this killing, or 2 weeks rather. As I understood it, he's just a guy with a microphone and a camera who said deliberately incendiary things to get a reaction. Who said that black women don't have the same brain power as others do, so they steal the jobs of white men. He's shouting slurs at audiences in the debate. Like this is not. This is the far cry from uh, RFK. Not that those are initials that anyone looks forward to with any pleasantness in this day and age, thanks to his son. But hey, that's life. It becomes sick and twisted. But yeah, just that jump to say, that it's political violence, that he was killed because of political violence, and that he wasn't allowed to express his opinion. He's been able to do so freely without getting shot or hit at or anything like that. And I think it just immediately made it a conversation about politics and people. And that is very helpful, I feel like, to one side that doesn't want to talk about the issue, was the only reason that something like this was allowed to happen in the first place. When I hear from people, gun owners, Utahns, people of all sorts of kinds and creeds saying, well, yeah, when you're like a kitty, you're a sharpshooter by the time you're 16 out there. I was like, that's terrifying to me. The fact that it was so easy and so accessible for this kid to take his, and I can only take this at face value. I know people have said a lot of things about the evidence, and this is still a developing story, I'm sure, and will be for the next year. But the fact that this kid was able to take his grandfather's rifle and without much trouble, with just one shot, he got him in the neck, of all places. Like I feel like if he had just gotten a little up or a little lower. I mean, people say, "Oh, he's trying to aim for his head and he missed." And it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're so dissatisfied with the shots that assassins take today." I know kids really got to work on their aim and their marksmanship before they start going out and killing public figures. But it immediately made it about the politics of the situation, when really the bigger you know issue, I think, here, and I think a lot of people would agree about that, is the accessibility of guns and the culture of guns that made this so easy and so able to occur. And another aspect of that is just what the kid consumed. Just from what reports that we've gotten, and it's still fledgling at best, that he was a follower of Nick Fuentes, and Nick hated Charlie, and Charlie hated Nick. There's that toxic culture of the internet that rewards people for putting uh, disinformation out there and incendiary remarks. We're supposed to be mean to people, and we're supposed to spew a lot of bullshit, a lot of controversial, a lot of cutting, a lot of incendiary bullshit. And it's always been a toxic environment, and it's always played to the benefit of people like Charlie Kirk. And you're not supposed to feel pleasure in the situation. You're not supposed to feel pleasure when people get hurt or killed in any fashion. But I think I did get a little bit of pleasure, not a lot, but a little bit of pleasure in the fact that the environment was finally so toxic that it ended the life of one of its waste mongers. I was like, oh, it's it's not just it's not just little kids that get shot nowadays. Sometimes it is the people who advocate that we not do anything about the gun issue in this country. People immediately just, liberal voices, liberal outlets, liberal podcasters and celebrities and such immediately went to the whole there is no excuse for political violence, and I'm just thinking like this is a golden opportunity. We're wasting it. We're fumbling it to make it about gun violence. To say this is this is ironically the fault of the party and the people that I'm sure are in a lot of pain and hurting and missing Charlie the most. As much as they might not want to hear this, this is their fault. This is what they have wrought by um, encouraging this toxicity, by giving it a platform and giving it followers and merchandise and college tours and all that shit, and by not doing a damn thing about the gun issue. It's not like it would have even been a background check that saved this situation. This kid just simply had access to a firearm, care of his family, and he went and did it. And he knew how to do it. He, had access to the gun. These were all byproducts. These are all byproducts of a country that celebrates firearms. And people should have, the liberty, people should have the right to have their own weapons. Like I always hate putting that in as a caveat because it's really, I mean, how many times has that led to a good situation? Charlie had a security team. The city of or town of Orem in Utah, I'm sure had a police department. At the end, what was it worth? What did it give us? There's no use. There's only so much we can do as preventative or defensive measures against gun violence. Eventually, this country will have to rot, if that is an acceptable verbiage, with just the nature of how guns are so accessible and so celebrated and so prevalent in our culture. I I feel that was the key thing. That was the key issue. And everyone, says it was a tough, horrible thing to watch. I've been watching videos of the diagrams of Charlie, of the bullet going in, of simulations of his neck tearing apart. I heard one person say, "Oh, I watched it from multiple angles and it made me sick," and that immediately didn't sit right with me because I was like, "You watched multiple angles and they made you sick? What did you watch one angle and then go, oh, okay, let me watch another angle. Okay, let me watch another angle. Okay, let me watch another angle. You know, we we don't admit it, but we have a fascination with gore in this country. And So many people have just been saying, he shouldn't have been shot for having a different opinion, for having different politics. We do a lot of whitewashing of just ideologies that don't even want to debate the merits of trans people in this country, of immigrants in this country. We harbor a lot of prejudices and cloak it up with the word politics. When it's politics, when it's a difference of opinion, it seems acceptable to us. We don't think of it as people fighting for liberties and freedoms against fascists and against fascist sympathizers like Charlie Kirk unfortunately was. And it's just been a very frustrating week, I feel, for communications. There was such an opportunity to get a clear, straight message and really use this, uh, for lack of a better term, tragedy, to do something purposeful and to say something useful out there. And I I'm even it's even weird to refer to it as an assassination. I feel in the end he was still like just a an incendiary monger. There's got to be, I'm not the best at coming up with terms for this, like an outrage generator. You know that was kind of the whole gambit. That's why he said this shit about black women and all the rest. Was he a Nazi? Was he a bigot? I I didn't know the man personally. Did he use these things to profit? Absolutely, absolutely. I do not feel he would be as visible or as prevalent, um, in today's age had he not said the things that he did that just apparently lacked any decency whatsoever, and then called it Christianity and called it politics and called it what have you. And for people to say, it's gonna radicalize people if Jimmy Kimmel, and I'll make a whole other freaking podcast about this, a whole other episode rather, because this just requires, I feel like, a whole other 20 minutes of speech. This weird behavior that we've developed with comedians, for ABC, Disney, for all these parent companies to say, well, we were afraid of, we wanted to be sensitive to the situation and we felt concerned about Jimmy Kimmel's remarks. They wanted to appease to a fascist, to secure a deal, to not lose any money, to make as much money as possible. I believe that with my heart. I know that's maybe a cynical or a jaded way to look at it, but I can't imagine any other reason, really. They they were cravenly going for the capitalistic route and weren't even adult enough to fess up to that. And I just feel that's crazy. But so yeah, this pep boy come to life and now come to death is really twisted with people. I've it's almost sent me down a conservative hole. It's like I have to watch as much conservative YouTube as I can stomach, to kind of hear people talk about who Charlie was, to try to get a fair assessment of the guy. I've been watching, uh, Candace Owens through other people on YouTube. Just kind of talk about the nitty gritty details of it. I appreciate it. I really consider Candace Owens his de facto widow that he couldn't marry because he didn't want to look like he was enacting DEI within his holy matrimony. Let me just say that again. He didn't want it to look like he was enacting DEI with his marriage. I'm so clever, and then I fuck myself with my own mouth. Um, but yeah, no, it's surreal to think about. seeing your friend get his neck blown out, and just thinking to myself, well, I'm gonna dig deep into it. It's as if Jackie Kennedy were on the Warren Commission herself, just thinking, what, back into the left, and that's the other thing too, that this 22-year-old kid got this long shot. I mean, I've been corrected by gun owners this entire time period. It seems like that this shot wasn't as impressive, and it didn't mean anything, and it didn't matter, and it didn't mean this. I don't know. It seemed impressive to me, and I don't like I still want to keep the somber tone of the event, but at the same time, it's like, damn, that's crazy. He could have easily missed that. He could have nicked his head, and he got that, and he managed to evade authorities for 33 hours. It was almost completely untraceable. Were it not for his family turning him in, there was no documentation. There was nothing to link it back to him. They just kind of had to rely on people to turn him in. You know, that's kind of what I have to believe. I mean, I guess thank God that we have him. I wouldn't be surprised. Is all I'm saying. Is if tomorrow we found out, oh yeah, it was an ex-Green Beret who was enraged by young people on YouTube for Tyler to say, "Oh, Charlie had such hate in his heart." It's like, dude, you're the one with a bullet. You're the one with a firearm. You're the one moving people over. As much as I found Charlie Kirk disgusting, I feel like he stooped to a lower level here. I don't see it as a political flame because of who Charlie was, what his methods were, and how he came across and how he did it. This wasn't so much as an assassination as it just was some person on the internet getting a clap back that they could not handle. Sometimes the universe doles out karmic paybacks in overkill, gives them degrees they don't deserve, but it doesn't mean we don't ask for it in some ways, because Charlie deliberately, the thumbs in the eyes, he doxed people. He, you know, made remarks about trans people that encouraged violence towards trans people. For him to fall victim to such violence, I feel like we need to take a step back and see what violence Charlie may have encouraged with his words towards these groups. And we can talk about the ideology of the shooter and try to legislate against it, but in the end, it is inscrutable. And I think in that tells us a lot about our culture. Is in that it was just a young kid who just kind of went down the rabbit hole of the internet and never came back, and and developed a severe opinion, and really just that's why kids don't have a parent, is because groypers, good luck explaining that to them when they're of age to understand what happened. If they don't still think their dad is out picking blueberries, oh god, the feds are after me. I've already said too controversial an opinion, and they're sending people after me. I'm about to be jailed for my opinion. But yeah, I do enjoy that Charlie Kirk. It's okay for him to go to college campuses. It's okay for him to it's okay to talk to college students as long as you have this debate setting around. Like, it would have been okay for Jerry Seinfeld to do what he did, as long as he did some stand up in NYU. I remember back in the day when it wasn't appropriate for adults to talk to college students, like adults of a certain age. Not that the college students are adults. It's insanity, and all I can say is that I hope history will remember history how it was meant to. We go through our lessons and we find out what kind of problematic people MLK and JFK were, and maybe this will just be a similar version of it. Maybe Charlie will be deified 30, 40 years from now, but there'll be users like us saying, "I remember when he used to say shit to sell boner pills on the internet." Anyways, if you're conservative, my address is 123 Evermore Lane, apartment 5G. My ass is ready to be yours. God bless everyone, and may we live in a safer country.